What's up everybody, Teancum here with Sew Yeah Quilting. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how you make this raggy quilt. Let's get started. To begin, we can make this project 100% scrappy if we choose to. Or a good alternative is to use a layer cake. This one that we're using today is by Moda. And as you can see in front of me, I've already gone ahead and pre-cut most of my pieces. So with the layer cake, we have to separate into two equal halves. Try to get the same amount of color on both halves. On top of, if you don't like one color in one half than the other, use your artistic eye to make sure everything lines up for you. Right here are my layer cake pieces. These pieces right here, I took my 10-inch square and I cut off two sides to make it 9 by 9. The next thing is we just cut our 10-inch squares into 4, so you're making 5 by 5 squares, which are these guys here. So 9 by 9, 5 by 5. And we're going to do the exact same thing with a backing fabric. Right here I've got my 9 by 9 backing fabric and my 5 by 5 backing fabric. The next step is to cut down our batting. This quilt is self-quilting, so this piece right here, which will be going in between my 9 by 9s, is an 8 by 8 square. The piece right here is a 4 by 4 square pieces of batting. So now that we got all the measurements and the cuts out of the way, it's time to start sewing. The very first thing that we do is we're going to take our backing fabrics, and what we're going to do is we're going to fold them in half, iron them down, and we're going to fold them in half again diagonally and iron them. That way it gives us really nice good crease marks, which I'm going to do right now. What these crease marks will allow us to do is to be able to just get on with sewing instead of marking every block. So let me take this over to our ironing board and iron this. So I'm not sure how visible this is on camera. As you can see, I have a giant X on my backing fabric here. This X is just going to allow us to sew without having to mark anything. What our next step is to do is to take one of our backing pieces. I'm going to lay on top of this piece of batting just so we can see better on the camera. Then I'm going to take one piece of batting. I'm going to put it right in the middle, and this doesn't have to be exactly right or exactly perfectly square, but get it as close as you can. Then I'm going to take my top piece and lay it down right on top. So I've created a little sandwich here. Now that I have my marks on my back for my ironing or my seam or my fold marks, I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew directly across corner to corner, following those lines. So I'm going to show this in the camera, that way everyone can see. I've sewn an X into my fabric here. I'm going to repeat this step for all of my small 5 by 5 squares. The next step after we do all of our 5 by 5s is to work on our 9 by 9s. So I'm going to take my 9 by 9 backing, following the exact same steps. I'm going to take my batting, put it down just like so. Then I'm going to take my print fabric or my top fabric, and I'm going to sew directly across again in that diagonal pattern. So I'm going to do that now. Now we know how to make both the big squares and the little squares. I'm going to finish up my little squares here and show you how to put them all together. Now that we've sewn all of our 5 by 5s squares with the X on top, what it's time to do is to sew them together, but we're going to change our seam allowance here. We're going to now sew for the rest of the video in 1/2 inch seams. The reason being is this piece of batting inside is 1/2 inch away from the edge all the way around. So we want to seal that in there on top of. That's what gives the rag quilt this look, is because of how thick these seams are. So what our very first step is to do is we're going to take two of our 5 by 5 squares and we're going to put things wrong side together, not right side together, wrong sides together. We're going to take them over to our sewing machine and sew a 1/2 inch seam. On the sewing machine that I'm currently using, it has a 1/2 inch mark on the side. It's right here. I'm not sure if you can see that on the screen, but it's right there. What you can also do is just take a ruler and put a blue piece of tape down, whatever's easiest for you. But I'm going to just line it with my 1/2 inch seam line here and sew all the way down. I'm going to open it up, and as you can see, I've got this really thick seam that's sticking up. I'm going to do the same thing to my top squares here. Again, wrong sides together. Just like that. Now, what our next step is we're going to put top and bottom together, wrong sides. And what we want to do is nest the seams. Essentially what nesting seams means is to take our back seam here and fold it over to the right, and our front seam and fold it to the left, so they're going opposite directions. This just helps keep the big puckers, or the big, best way to say it, the knot of our seam as flat as possible. So again, taking over to our sewing machine, 1/2 inch seams. Now, when I open this up, this is what our quilt block looks like. So, probably at the beginning of the video, you were probably thinking, why do we cut our 10 by 10 squares down to 9 by 9? It's because due to these 1/2 inch seams, this block has now shrunk down to be a 9 inch block. So it should line up perfectly with our 9 by 9 squares, which we're gonna start putting our rows together, which is very simple. We're gonna take one big square and the 4 patch square, and we're gonna put them wrong sides together, and again using that 1/2 inch seam, and sew all the way down. We're going to continue to just repeat this process and start making rows, and I'll be right back. As you can see in front of me, I've got one of my rows almost laid all the way out. And we're just gonna keep adding on to this. So I'm gonna attach my 2 pieces that I had to the end of this row. Again, wrong sides together. If we do right sides together, it won't make a rag quilt. So I'm putting these wrong sides together. So that right there is one completed row. I'm gonna make a couple more rows and I'll be right back. So I've made a couple more rows and I've laid them all out. I'm gonna show you how you attach rows together. Whenever I do rows, I like to use Wonder Clips. And what we're going to do is, again, wrong sides together. I'm gonna start right here so you can see in the camera. I'm gonna put wrong sides together, and I'm gonna put those seams right together. Fold one over one way, the other the other. That way I'm nesting these seams. I'm gonna clip it down. I'm gonna go all the way down the length of this block, or these rows, excuse me, and clip them together. It just makes it a little bit easier to sew. If you feel confident that you can freehand it, go ahead and try it. But for me, I just like to take the extra second here to get everything pinned together right. Perfect. I'm gonna take this over to our sewing machine. I'm gonna sew that 1/2 inch seam all the way down. So that is how you add on a row. Let me show you how you clip the quilt. That way it looks like a rag quilt. I'm going to just take a normal pair of scissors here, and every single seam we're going to clip at a 1/2 inch increment. So I'm going to just start right here. I'm going to just clip down close to the seam, but we do not want to cut our seam or else our seams will come apart. So it's just like this, and you're going to just keep clipping all the way down. And it gives you this kind of frayed look. When you come to a seam, you'll notice that the seam will go in 4 different directions. What you want to do is just get your scissors up underneath the seam, or sorry, not the seam. You want to get your scissors up underneath the knot and cut. And you want to do that to all 4 sides. So I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to fold it over. I'm going to do it this way. And I've got one this way. which then when that frays out, it'll look really, really nice. I'm going to continue to cut all of my seams here, and then I'll show you what the quilt looks like in the end. So I'm not sure how well you can see on the top camera, but you can see how I've cut this all down, and let me hold it up so everyone can see at home what the quilt looks like. Just like that. The last thing to do to finish up our entire quilt, because this quilt does not need to be long-armed due to the batting's already inside of it and we've sewn it down. The very last step we have to do is sew a 1/2 inch seam all the way around the quilt and then clip our edges. That's essentially our binding for the entire project. If you've liked this video, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and don't be afraid to share it with your friends. As always, we're going to leave instructions on how to make this in the description below. My name's Teancum, teaching you how to sew like a pro. We'll see you here next week at Sew Yeah Quilting.